All right, you're live.
Okay, welcome, folks. This is House Correction Institutions Committee. It is April Fool's Day. It is April 1st, Wednesday. And we're over the hump, I think, on the legislative session. We're now entering our last month, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. We don't know yet. No,
Oh, God.
6, 7 weeks. We've got some time to get an update in terms of where the city of Montpelier is in terms of the flood recovery from first flood, the big flood, which was in 23. Some members of this committee took a tour of the Capitol complex and saw the damage, and we have some buildings, about 5 buildings that we really need to make a decision what we do with the buildings that are not habitable at this point. In the whole Capitol complex and how that goes into Montpelier, your goals for economic development and regrowth, as well as taking care of the floodplain issues. And also, this is all kind of intertwined with FEMA, with the state negotiating with FEMA and vice versa. So I thought it would be a good time just to hear where the commission is in terms of the work that you've been doing for the recovery, and give us an update on what's happening. Welcome, John. If you could identify yourself for the record.
Thank you so much, Committee Chair. My name is John Copans, and I am actually the Executive Director. We've gone through a transition. So the organization I work for now is called Foundation for Montpelier.
Foundation for what?
For a Resilient Montpelier.
Resilient.
And I'll give you a little background on that transition, which is that I previously was in this committee as the director of something called the Montpelier Commission for Recovery and Resilience.
We're going to blame Connor for this. 'Cause
Connor.
Connor is telling you that he's not here, so we're really going to blame him.
So Montpelier Commission for Recovery and Resilience was formed after the 2023 floods. It had a 2-year charge to really push forward with recovery and resilience projects in the city. As that 2 years came to a close, it was clear there was more work to do. In fact, flood resilience is probably a lifetime project here in the city of Montpelier, not just in Montpelier, but across the state. And so there was a pre-existing organization in the city called the Montpelier Foundation with 501c3 status. And essentially, the Montpelier Commission and the Montpelier Foundation merged and became this new organization that is a permanent 501c3 in the city called Foundation for a Resilient Montpelier. And we will be carrying forward the resilience work that the commission was doing for the last 2 years, but we will also be continuing the foundation's work. It was a small community foundation that makes grants for brick and mortar projects. So we'll be continuing that work as well.
So you're looking at the whole downtown area as well. It's on Main Street, all of that, as well as what happens here on State Street.
I mean, it's anything that's of concern to our city is of concern to us. And as I think you all appreciate, while it is natural to think of the Capitol complex and downtown Montpelier sort of in separate ways, because in a way they're separate jurisdictions, but really I would encourage you all, and I think you're pretty good about thinking about it as one ecosystem. We in Montpelier care deeply about having sort of a healthy and vibrant Capitol complex that is welcoming to the world, really. Like, let's be honest about what happens here in Montpelier. We as a state welcome the world to this state house. And you particularly experience that in peak foliage season when it is a constant flow of buses traveling through this community, that we are the face of this state to the world, right? And also, the truth is you all get to work here, so, 4 to 6 months out of the year. And so you get to experience this place in all of its glory as well. And so what we want is to have a downtown that matches the Capitol complex, right? Both of those interact, and we want to have a downtown that draws people in the same way that we have a state house and a Capitol complex that draw people in. And so our goal, one of our goals, one of the things, we are not part of the municipality. We're a separate 501c3, but our mission is really to work hand in glove with the municipality. I would actually make a little side note that we are really excited to welcome both a brand new mayor to the city, a gentleman named Mark Gwynn, who actually was on that tour with you all of buildings. And Mark was on our commission, the Montpelier Commission for Recovery.
He won, right?
He won. That's right. He is our new mayor, and we have a brand new city manager as well, Kelly Curry. And so, and that brand new city manager replaces Bill Frazier, who served 30 years in that role. So talk about a transition for a city. We've got somebody brand new in this role. So a mayor and a new manager really represent sort of a new beginning for this city. I want to mention a couple of things that we're working on. One is and I think I've talked about this in here. I've certainly mentioned it to BGS, which is it is our intention to deploy something called a River's Edge Master Plan for the city of Montpelier, because the truth is we do not embrace our river here in the city. It's sort of this forgotten thing that flows through town.
No doubt.
And it's forgotten until we get a massive storm, and then all of a sudden that river is in our basements and backyards, right? And so what the flood in 2023 precipitated is a sense that we really need to transform our relationship to the river. Now, look at the river frontage in Montpelier. A lot of it's private property, some of it's city property, a fair amount of it, of course, is state property, right? And so we see tremendous opportunity when you look at that sort of field of asphalt that just sort of lines the river around the state complex. But obviously, that's a complicated question. Anytime you're talking about parking, you're talking about a sensitive topic. But we do, I would say, and I will be honest, it has been a while since we've checked in with the commissioner and deputy commissioner at BGS. So I honestly don't have the latest, but to be honest, we've had some encouraging words from them in terms of where there might be opportunities on sort of that side of State Street, and particularly on the riverfront. But it's my hope that, the city of Montpelier applied for a municipal planning grant. We found additional funds to do this River's Edge master planning process. We're going to be doing that over the course of 2026 and probably into 2027. But it is our hope that we do have active participation from BGS and from the Capital Complex Commission as well, because ultimately we've got to work across jurisdictional lines when we think about this city and also about the riverfront here in Montpelier.
So one piece that's to disposal is FEMA.
Yeah.
Because when you're talking about the river corridor, Capital Complex, as you said, backs up to the river, where that's where our buildings are. The 5 of them are not habitable at this point. We have to make a determination what we do, which is connected to FEMA in terms of how do we rebuild Capital Complex after the flood damage for that. So it's all intertwined. And I would also recommend for you folks not only to stay in contact with the commissioner of BGS, but also with Doug Farnham, who is there for the state negotiating with FEMA, because it's all intertwined for that. And some of us have been through 2 flooding episodes here. Montpelier, one was back in 1992 when we had the big ice gene. And that was a very different kind of flooding than the one we experienced in 23, which was the downpour of rain. And the flooding that occurred in 92 was in March, the beginning of March. And we had a lot of rain overnight, but we ended up with an ice jam behind the Capitol Plaza. And it flooded all of downtown and came up a little bit to the pavilion, but not much. So it didn't really impact Capitol Complex at all. But it was everything down State Street to Main Street and all of Main Street. That was devastating. It was in the middle of the winter, and then that night, they were working on the river to unblock the ice jam. And that night, the temperature dropped to below zero.
Right.
So everything, finally, when they released the ice jam, which was about 11 o'clock midnight, all the water just went out, but then everything froze up downtown.
Yeah.
Everything froze up because it went below zero. In 23, it was a whole different event
Absolutely.
in the middle of the summer, and then all started to come in from this way and flooded the complex and the downtown.
One of our representatives from the Bennington County,
Oh, just
his car went
Brand new
down the
car.
river in 92.
Really?
Brand new
Is that
car.
right?
brand new car.
Jeez.
Was he in it?
No, that was, he was the doctor. He had Dr. Shea from Arlington.
But it was parked and just the water?
Actually,
It came right up behind the Capitol.
They had
Plaza.
There
told-
was little warning about that.
they had told everyone to evacuate, and I think he thought he had some time. He did.
We lost some cars back there. I mean, you talk to legislators who were staying at the Capitol Plaza, it happened about 8 o'clock. 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, and they were looking out their window from their room, they could see the ice jam starting and water coming up. Some of them could get their cars out of there, and others lost their cars. And legislators just bailed out of there really fast. It was quite an episode.
Well, and I would say it's a good example because what we have done since then is that, in fact, there's a wastewater treatment facility
Mhm.
that is at the intersection of the Dog River and the Winooski, further downstream from town. And what they've installed is a system where you take the effluent from that wastewater treatment, it's clean water that normally comes into the Dog River, and they pipe it upstream so that it actually serves as melting. The function, because it's warmer, it melts a channel through the river. And in fact, we would like to expand that. There is sort of another proposal on the books to expand that further upstream. But that's an example of a municipal project that really has benefit to the state, right? Because another ice jam could have real implications. And so those are the kind of investments. It took years to make that investment, but it's very much a worthwhile investment because honestly, this was another winter where, I mean, I happen to be traveling through the Mad River Valley, and those ice jams have a force to them. You can see, I mean, it was just below the covered bridge in the village of Waitsfield. And like, once it stops that water and serves as an obstruction, that it really can be catastrophic.
Right,
And
so
so
that's what happened here in 92.
it's an example with resilience where you can't just focus on the most recent disaster. You sort of have to have that broad view of what the risks are because there's always something different.
Well, with the 23, there was warning and people left the Capitol complex because, and a lot of it was like, really? You really think it's gonna flood? But people did leave. The 92, that happened in the morning, about 7:30. I mean, I was traveling in and all of a sudden the water was just around my car. And I'm thinking, I'm going to someplace high. So it's like all of a sudden it just happened. And nobody knew what was going on unless you happened to see the ice jam behind the Capitol Plaza. That's when it happened, and it stayed there all day. So that was a whole different event. But either way, you're destroying, the downtown's been destroyed twice in the Capitol complex this past time.
Well, and the other thing you correctly highlighted is in 2023, I mean, ultimately you would call that an inundation flood. There was just so much precipitation across the watershed. And, but to some degree, one of the issues is actually downstream of town, right? Where the Dog River comes in, it narrows there. We call it Cemetery Bend. It's where the I-89 overpass is. There is an opportunity there to actually sort of expand things out a little bit under the overpass. And even though that's, maybe a half mile from town, it would have tangible benefit in allowing the water to flow more quickly as opposed to backing up. Similarly, we have an issue where the North Branch comes into the main branch right in downtown Montpelier. And again, when the water rises in the main branch, it tends to back up in the north branch.
That's
So
Langdon Street.
That's Langdon Street, exactly. That's right. So,
Are there any issues with silting that reduces just the carrying capacity of the river through the city?
you know, it's modest, I guess, is what I would say, there is a fair amount of discussion. I think I will translate what you talk about with silting to the sense of dredging as a potential way to address flooding. And the sense that we get very strongly from the Rivers Program and river engineers is that dredging is not sort of a global solution. There are certain locations where you've got to deal with it. For example, there's what's called the Bailey Bridge, which is probably the bridge that most of you come over right by the high school there. And that bridge is a lot of rubble gathered under that bridge after the 2023 flood. There was a real strong sense from BGS of like, we've got to get some of that rubble out from under that bridge. So like, there are specific locations where it makes sense, especially around infrastructure, to do that kind of work. But what doesn't ultimately make sense is do this sort of larger scale dredging, because ultimately what that facilitates is the river to move faster and frankly to create more erosion that actually creates more issues downstream. And so you've really got to be thoughtful about how you deploy.
No, I get that, but it's when the weather's nicer and the river level is lower, I tend to go for a walk, like over by the bank and along. And there are spots that just look like it's
Pretty
not
silted.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah, and in fact, one of our proposals is to remove, it's a little bit confusing because there's a dam under Shaw, by the Shaw's Bridge, that's called the Bailey Dam, despite the fact that that's the Bailey Bridge in a different location. But that dam, we're actually advocating to remove, and in fact have submitted proposals to remove. And part of what that would enable is if you look upstream of that dam, there is a lot of silt in the river there. And once that dam came out, they would actually, as part of it, they would remove a lot of the silt because a lot of it carries phosphorus. So there's a real water quality benefit to getting that silt out of the river. But that river would look very different upstream once that dam came out. And again, there would be some location specific flood resilience benefits to removing that dam there. So what we're doing is trying to find, the reality of a place like Montpelier and the topography is that there's not a silver bullet to solve flooding in the city. It's really going to take this multi-pronged generational effort. Another project we're doing is restoring floodplain at a property called 5 Home Farmway. It's over where the Agway is and the roundabout. This is where the Stevens branch comes into the main branch. You see a lot of branches come together here in Montpelier, but we will be restoring about 11 acres of floodplain on that property, which means removing 1,500 dump trucks full of material from that site, essentially to allow that river to spread out and to slow down, because that makes a difference. And just before I move on, just upstream from that, right, we have the AOT garage, the old AOT garage. And I'm sure you all are sort of part of those conversations about moving that AOT garage up to higher ground in Berlin. We are very enthusiastic about sort of the deconstruction of that old AOT garage, and again, returning that property to floodplain as well. Everywhere we have opportunities along the river to allow that river to spread out and slow down, we have to seize on those opportunities.
So you're gonna be extracting an awful fill, 1,500 truckloads. If you talk to the town of Waterbury, where it could go, because they want to build up Randall.
Oh, Randall Meadows,
They
yeah.
want to build that up. Would that be a combination? Would there be something there that could do?
We haven't spoken specifically about that, but as I understand it, there will definitely be a process to try to find the closest possible place.
Way to go.
Right, you want to,
You want
like,
even closer?
It's just like it starts to add up.
I mean, think about the cost of diesel right now, right? So like literally you want to find the closest appropriate spot to take that, where ideally
It's a good idea.
it's serving a function.
Just the thought.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's-
I mean, another thing, there happens to be a rail line that goes right there as well. So like one question was, geez, instead of trucks, could you use the rail but then you'd have to create a siding for it. Like there's all kinds of issues around using rail.
Where'd you put all this building?
I mean, this is the kind of stuff that will develop over time. Like, I don't think we've answered that question because I think some of it's about when is that fill available? Who's looking for it? So I'm not sure it's a question they've answered yet.
And you're on the other section of Montpelier, it's not like you're here, it's further out.
It's about a mile, a little less from a mile. If you keep going on Memorial Drive,
12 miles, something like that.
so but not.
Be on Route 2 probably the whole way.
Yeah, that would be tough.
And it's gonna tear, and you gotta go when it's dry because it's tearing up the road.
Yeah,
You know,
it's tough.
So the other thing I want to mention, because it's something we talked about last year, is the former, the still federal building at 87 State Street.
CBs,
Yeah, it is. But here's the good news side of that, which is when we were here last year, basically the feds had just said they're going to dispose of the property. We didn't know anything about what that entailed. We didn't know what the opportunities and obstacles in terms of redevelopment of that property was.
This is the post office.
This is the former post office and federal building. It's at 87 State Street, so it's literally like directly across from the Capitol Plaza, just about directly across from the Capitol Plaza. And just to zoom out, like we're talking about 1.6 acres of land, 50,000 usable square feet in the building. What happens with that piece of property is tremendously important to the future of Montpelier, to the vitality of downtown. I would also argue it's important to the Capitol complex because like we're a stone's throw from this state house. What nobody wants is a blighted piece of property sitting there for decades.
Right.
That doesn't interest anybody. I interrupted. Go ahead.
So no, what would be, what's coming out as like the best use for that space, or what's everyone thinking about?
Well, so just to express some appreciation in working with you, Representative Casey was tremendously helpful in this. What we secured last year was a $100,000 appropriation that went directly to Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission to allow us to do some due diligence work to figure out that very question of like, how can we put this building to use and this property to use? We have now basically spent the entirety of that appropriation working through CVRPC. When we look at the building itself, first of all, it's a tremendously solid building.
Yes, it is.
Concrete slabs, like it is. So on one hand, you sort of look at it from the outside and there are many people who don't love the aesthetics of the building, but the reality is it's very well constructed. And so our default position is let's put that building back to use as opposed to tear it down. So then the follow-on question is, okay, so what do you do with a building like that? The truth is it's like a big box and it has a lot of interior space. And when you have something with a lot of interior space, it's not great for repurposing as housing. Because the truth is, to live in a space, you need access to light, and you don't want all of that internal space. Now, you can conceivably solve something like that by like cutting a courtyard into the middle of the space, right, to allow some light in.
Ace and Bloomer, they did that, and then the roof leaks.
Well, and it's expensive, right? Making those sorts of modifications. So it's our intention, actually, basically, it is designed as commercial space. Let's keep it commercial space. But there is another chunk of land behind the property. And our analysis shows that we could fit about 70 units of housing behind the property. And the goal would be a couple of parking decks and then that housing right there. And so that parking could serve the building, that parking could serve the housing.
Parking deck under the building?
Yes.
It couldn't be under the existing building. It would be under the new housing.
The new one?
Yes, exactly. Yep. Yes, it would be under the housing. So
Well, build it strong.
the part,
and
yeah,
make sure you got maintenance.
Maintenance,
You're gonna
yeah.
build a building on top of it.
this has been impressed upon me is that you've got to look
It's not
after the
really
maintenance.
cherry.
Yeah. So, but if not for, and to remind folks, the state of Vermont through the Agency of Commerce and Community Development raised their hand to say we would be interested in potentially purchasing the property, even though they really weren't. But that was a way for us to prolong the process with GSA to allow us to do this due diligence work. And so the other thing we learned, and it was really only by coincidence, we hired Stone Environmental that had already worked with a subcontractor that had already been in that building on behalf of GSA. And they happened to know that there was a particular report around PCB concentrations in the building. If we had not hired Stone Environmental, we never would have known to ask for that report. We had to ask for it 4 different times before finally they produced a report. And the bad news about that report is it shows pretty heavy contamination in terms of PCBs in the building. The other bad news is what GSA will not allow us to do is any characterization of those contaminations in the purchasing process. What they say is it's an as is where is sale, and ultimately there's nothing in law that prohibits them from selling a contaminated building. So they are being very dismissive of our concerns.
Any thoughts about how to deal with the PCBs?
The first thing we have to do, first of all, because we would have to take ownership of the building in order to characterize. And so in fact, I was just across the hall. Our proposal right now, and actually we're working hand in hand with Newport that has their own piece of property that has a federal involvement in that they don't like to call it the pit, but that's tied up in the EB5 process. Therefore, it's controlled by a federal receiver.
Yep.
Our building is obviously owned by GSA. The proposal is to repurpose a program that's administered by Department of Economic Development called the Rural Industrial Development Program. It's already set up to support regional development corporations and local development corporations. And so essentially, and there's $2.5 million sitting in that program right now. The idea is we would sort of expand the scope and target it specifically to what we're calling federally impacted communities. What we are doing in Montpelier is we're establishing something called a local development corporation, which is an entity defined by statute explicitly for the redevelopment of property. And it would be that LDC that would participate, because at this point, GSA is taking that building to auction. They've stopped negotiating with us in terms of trying to settle on a price.
When are they going to auction?
Probably on the May to June timeframe. So it'll be a 60-day auction. And so we think it'll get us well into the summer in terms of having to.
Is that a good or bad thing, the auction?
Got some bids.
You know, here's what I'd say. We knew it was coming.
Yeah.
And it's not a surprise to us. The bad part is the thing that we fear is an undercapitalized investor just buying that property to add to their portfolio without the wherewithal to really navigate the redevelopment process. Like that's the scary scenario. And an auction to some degree is one step closer to that. On the other hand, GSA was not moving from $2.4 million for the property. And given our estimates in terms of PCB cleanup range anywhere from $1 to $3 million, we could not in good conscience purchase at 2.
So is the PCB going to be out there publicly for folks who are bidding on it?
Absolutely. It'll be part of the packet. So again, if you all had not appropriated that $100,000 to us,
You
we
never-
used that $100,000 in part to hire Stone Environmental, that would have never come to light. And we would have a buyer with no knowledge of that contamination, all of a sudden sitting on a building with a real challenge in terms of redevelopment. So we've already achieved success in sort of shining sunlight on what some of the challenges are for the property.
But I just have to say this though too, is to rebuild that building right now, it would cost $50 or $60 million.
Yep.
So when you're
Yep.
dealing with this kind of stuff, it would be thoughtful of us to at least not help, but to keep in mind that those are really inconsequential when talking about that kind of a building.
And that's exactly, but the first thing we have to understand is what's it going to cost to remediate?
Sure, but
You
even
gotta
at 3
understand-
million, it's like,
But even, right, when you're
That's
looking
the
at
deal.
constructing, and that's part of our posture towards the building has sort of shifted because it's got good bones, as they
yes,
say.
yes.
And to construct new on that site is, it's a challenge.
Yeah. So fixing it will be cheaper. Lots cheaper.
Well, if remediation actually works, I mean,
It-
can you describe like the PCB problem?
Essentially, it's in paint, it's in window caulk.
Well, the mastics, yeah, but
So
I mean, has it
really-
invaded the cement around it like happened at Burlington High, you know?
This is part of why we need to characterize, it,
Yeah.
right? Like those are the questions that honestly, the way the GSA process is set up, any conventional commercial or industrial real estate transaction, there's going to be an inspection, and any buyer is going to say, I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with contamination before we close on this. That's not what we're dealing with the federal government. And so just to make the pitch to you all, that's why we're having this conversation across the hall about getting this language added, because we do feel like it's a very unique circumstance we're dealing with.
How many other communities are gonna be vying for that? Those dollars that the language is included.
I mean, this is there, you're highlighting attention there, which is we're potentially changing that program to make it much more appealing to other communities in addition to Newport.
But it has to
And the
be
Montpelier.
federal, there has to be a federal.
Well, and that's what we're talking about, is some of the language is very specific about the federal impacts.
I can just imagine some communities seeing some money there for economic development. They would want it.
Absolutely. And to be honest, thinking long-term, having a program with some flexibility to help communities with some of these properties may well be something that you all as legislators decide is an important tool to develop, because the truth is,
It's tough.
Montpelier is not alone, and we've got a lot of downtown properties across the state that need their next life.
Yeah.
And there's not just private financing to make that happen.
And TIFs don't always work in all communities.
Well, and in fact, the mayor of Newport was across the hall just talking about how TIF just doesn't get them far enough to do what they need to do in Newport. So,
And
Well, they could help us in the courthouse.
well, there's, yeah, I'm staying out of that one, but like,
Yeah, wise decision.
how wide's the building?
oh, I don't know. I mean, 50,000 square feet, 3
No.
floors,
Right.
like, yeah.
I'm just trying to think of like, I'm like, cause what about Chip?
Mhm.
And if it was housing, what if it was a little like, what if those middle like areas became hallways and every hallway in New York City doesn't have light in, doesn't have windows in it.
Yep.
So it's like, and then you get to the outside areas which do have light, and maybe there are some pantries and closets that are dark. I don't know. It just
Yeah,
seems
absolutely.
like it's not without merit that you could think about it being housing.
And that is very much still on the table.
Okay, yeah.
I'm sort of describing where our primary analysis is, but like the truth is, we're only at phase 1 of this.
Yeah.
And I would say everything is still possible.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah.
Anyway, it was just a thought. I'm just,
Yeah.
depending on how wide it is and where that hallway is in the middle to get people, and then,
Do you use the interior space for storage
Sure.
or like,
oh, yeah, you do.
like exercise room or those kinds of things
Yes.
that, yeah.
So was that building built about the same time 133 State Street was built?
It was built in 1963.
63, so it's not that.
Not 60 years, but before PC developed, but it was right in
No,
the middle of
during-
PCPs.
Right in the middle, yeah.
Ugh.
So I'm just wondering, 133 State Street, the way it's designed.
It's supposed to have a partner, right? Isn't it? That's what I always heard.
Yeah.
Like if you look at it, yeah.
But I'm just thinking the internal part may be really dark inside 133 and how they've designed it, so you don't feel that darkness when you're in there. And I'm just wondering if that could be looked at as a model. Just like-
big bar.
Other big bar.
Yeah.
Well, then you design the first floor to be wet. Design that first floor of that building to get underwater.
Because it's going
And
to.
you can do that now.
Well, and in fact, the other opportunity that the building represents is the first story is actually a story tall. So what we could actually do is build up so that you were above flood elevation and still have usable space on the first floor. So that's another
Oh,
option.
that's cool.
And potentially, we've analyzed like literally filling in the basement, and
Yeah.
getting all those utilities gotta come out of harm's way.
That's what we did in Waterbury.
Hey, that's where those 1,500,
Yeah, the fill.
Okay.
Phil just.
Yeah.
But we did that in Waterbury. We filled in the basement and all the tunnels.
Yeah,
Filled that all in.
and that proved
We had.
to be a smart
the
decision.
First floor was underground a little bit, so we filled all that.
Yeah, yep.
Anything else before we break for lunch?
No, thank you.
This is very helpful, John.
I really appreciate the invitation. Yeah.
Thank you, Connor, for recommending to bring them in. Hey, where's
Well, thanks,
Linus?
everybody. Yeah, great job, John. Cheers.
Yeah, where is
Yeah, where's
Linus?
Linus?
I can bring him up this afternoon. Absolutely. See everybody.
We would like that.
Are we on this? We are on this afternoon, right? No, we're not.
Oh, I'm aware.
You gotta go get Linus.